not honor Jefferson Davis.
These are cool pictures.
Yeah, they think we're divided now. No. Yeah.
So in 1792, when the state of Kentucky was founded, the land claims went straight out west to the Mississippi River. But, you know, like a lot of places in the United States, those pesky native people had already claimed a huge portion of the land, specifically the Chickasaw. So it wasn't until 1818 till Andrew Jackson, who was then senator from Tennessee, and Isaac Shelby, the very first governor of Kentucky, negotiated with two Chickasaw chieftains, Levi and George Colbert, the sale of what was then called the Jackson Purchase and later called just the Purchase, which ended up being all of West Tennessee and this very most western part of Kentucky, the Purchase area of Kentucky. Levi and George Colbert were actually only half Chickasaw. They were half Chickasaw, half European, and a lot of people speculate that they took bribes to make sure that the Treaty of Tuscaloosa went through and the sale of this land, some 10,700 square miles, was approved. For only $300,000, the United States government bought this land from the Chickasaw and was paid out over 20 years. As soon as the Treaty of Tuscaloosa was ratified by the U.S. Congress, settlement happened very rapidly. Andrew Jackson founded Memphis, and thousands of people moved to this area from the eastern parts of the United States because they could get land very cheaply, something like 160 acres for about $400, which is an amazing deal, I guess, at the time. Now, the geography of the Jackson Purchase, specifically in western Kentucky, is one where you have the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers that separate the Jackson Purchase from the rest of the state, and it runs all the way to the Mississippi and north to the Ohio. Now, like I said, the Treaty of Tuscaloosa was signed in 1818, ratified shortly thereafter, but this part of the state of Kentucky, the Jackson Purchase region, wasn't accessible except by ferry across the Tennessee River until 1931. So for over 100 years, this part of the state was geographically isolated from the rest of Kentucky. And not only was it geographically isolated, it was economically and culturally distinct from the rest of the state. Because the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers run north and the Ohio and Mississippi run south, this part of the state became much more economically and socially integrated with the south of the United States, like West Tennessee. And slavery was much bigger here than it was in the rest of Kentucky. And cotton growing was also much bigger industry, etc. So this is a really unique part of Kentucky that we're going to explore just a little bit today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Civil War history. We're going to talk a little bit of its modern political significance. And yeah, I don't know, kind of a weird, nerdy video, but if you're watching this channel, you're probably already into that, so. So in October of 1861, the end of October, because the Jackson Purchase had Confederate sympathies, a bunch of delegates met in this house in Russellville, where they officially seceded and formed a shadow government of Kentucky. They elected a governor, and with the intention of eventually taking over the state and inaugurating themselves, and they actually met in this building right here. It's now a law office, but it's known as the William Forst House. and that was actually where the shadow government of Kentucky was formed. A really beautiful old architecture, I think. So I didn't know this actually, but there's this plaque here in the kind of central downtown of Russellville that talks about John Littlejohn, who was a preacher who lived in this area. He was from the East Coast, and we walked right past, but the back actually details how he was the guardian of the Declaration of Independence. During the War of 1812, when the British took over Washington, President James Madison actually entrusted him with the archives of the United States. It's pretty crazy. So because of this divided nature, Kentucky was a true battleground state during the Civil War. In fact, before even Fort Sumter, the governor of Kentucky at the time, Beriah McGuffin, had proposed different compromises with the other states to try to avoid what he knew would be a catastrophic war, not just in terms of economically for the state of Kentucky, but also blood. He wasn't the only Kentuckian to propose compromise. There's actually John Crittenden, who is a very famous longtime politician from Kentucky, tried multiple routes at compromise. And just kind of to drive the point home of how divided the state was, Crittenden's two sons each served in the Civil War on different sides, which really kind of drives home how he was trying to forge a compromise you know, for the country to avoid what seemed really inevitable. In fact, after Fort Sumter, President Lincoln wrote a letter to Beriah McGuffin, the governor of Kentucky, asking for the 75,000 militia troops that were supposed to be called up by the Union Army. And Beriah McGuffin wrote him a very short, nasty reply that detailed how he would not be supplying Kentucky's troops to fight a brotherly war against the southern states. The weather pretty much chased us out of Russellville, which is unfortunate, but that shadow government was stationed and made the capital in Bowling Green. And during the early part of the war, Kentucky was neutral. But Kentucky neutrality was violated in early September when the Confederates took Columbus and Hickman in this part of the state, in the Jackson Purchase region in the western part of Kentucky. And then shortly thereafter, Grant took Paducah, and so the General Assembly, which had become staunchly Republican, staunchly Unionist, because of special elections during the summer of 1861, which was boycotted by the Confederates. And in general, secession wasn't popular in the state of Kentucky. After neutrality was violated, the General Assembly passed resolutions of support for the Union, and the Union flag was raised over Frankfort. But there was obviously a Western campaign in which Grant dislodged the Confederates from this part of the state at battles like Fort Henry, Fort Donelson, eventually culminating in Shiloh and Corinth, Mississippi. But because of being dislodged from this part of the state, the shadow government fled, and the shadow governor, George Johnson, actually volunteered to fight for the Confederates at Shiloh and was killed. The first major blow to this conspiracy, essentially the shadow government of Kentucky during the Civil War. Jesus, that is fucking huge. I mean, it's not good that it's for this guy, but it's fucking impressive. Is there a giant fucking like celebration today? Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I almost don't even want to go here. What does it say?
I couldn't see it.
Oh, it's like Amish people. Okay, I feel way better all of a sudden.
Well, it's some Amish people, it's some not Amish people.
Okay. I mean, it's just like a farmer's market. These are cool pictures. This will be the first time, my first obelisk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been in one
Thank you
either,
for
actually.
making us your first experience.
Oh, awesome old elevator too.
Where y'all going today?
We're gonna make it out to Fancy Farm, hopefully.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
checking.
This is all poured concrete. Poured in limestone rock.
When was it built?
Started in 1917 and ended in 24. Now they got up 156 feet of the 351 by 18.
Wow,
World War I ended, and they called them a non-essential work project. And probably it was due to the shortage of concrete. That's what I'm speculating.
I was either workers or concrete.
And so there's plenty of workers around here.
I guess.
As a matter of fact, I'll stop. The first wage was $2.50 a week.
Wow, a week.
And they went on strike. He got 3.5.
Hey man, they almost doubled that shit.
All this built by hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
And there's no, it was all wooden scaffolding inside and out. There was a guy here not too long ago about your age and said, well, my great grandfather used to tell us that he worked here and there was wooden pulleys and ropes and buckets and they pull the concrete up to pour the forms.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You're up
This
for
is
that.
incredible.
It's really cleared off now.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Wow. What a view.
This is Mennonite.
Okay.
Not all, but a great majority are Mennonite farmers.
And is that recently or is that?
No, started here in the 80s.
Okay.
During the farm crisis of the 80s. I remember being in business with my dad, and we had to borrow money at 19%.
Holy
Well,
cow.
farmers went out of business
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah. Okay.
So Mennonites sold in Pennsylvania and came down here. Three other houses. This is no Amish through here, and there is a distinction.
Mennonite and Amish, yeah.
He's liberal, not in his theology, but lifestyle. His wife drives a van. They have computers. They have credit card machines.
Yeah, so it just varies, right?
It just varies.
Right.
And much of it varies upon the bishop of your church.
What he allows.
And a church is not one building. The church is the us
people,
three.
yeah,
It's the people.
Yeah, interesting.
So, and that's the reason that you'll have some around here that you'll see in the middle of winter with no buggy top. Because the bishop says you don't need that.
In the middle of winter, though?
You better believe it. Saw this last week, and it is funny. Somebody had a lady was in an open buggy with her husband, and that was probably due to church, possibly. And she had an umbrella pointed out this way because the wind was coming this way. Oh,
So an umbrella's okay, but a buggy cover's not?
No.
Wow.
No.
No, that is
But they're wonderful folks. Wonderful.
Oh, what I found out is most people are wonderful.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
I've had 2 knuckleheads since 2017. And that wasn't,
It was like graffiti or something? Or?
I had a little bit of graffiti one day, and it was just kids.
Yeah.
Didn't even know what they were doing.
Yeah.
That's my greatest fear, is graffiti. We do not honor Jefferson Davis. Now, I think he was a special person in history because of his activities and all that,
of course.
but we don't honor him here. And some people have a problem with that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But we don't honor him. We just tell his story.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting to me because like Kentucky, birthdays of Lincoln.
Yeah.
Jefferson Davis. I think most people, a lot of Americans today, don't realize how we think we're divided today,
Yes.
right? We think we're divided today.
Yeah.
Like no.
He loved peacocks. And fan and all that. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
They must have had him just all over his wife thought it was spawns of Satan. And so Veronica hired a chef. True story. They could cook peacock. History tells us that we have no idea how many peacocks Davis ate. knowing they were chicken.
Yeah.
That is a true story.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much,
Guys,
David.
y'all take care.
You too.
Pleasure.
You never know what great experiences you could have. You know, sometimes you just got to say yes to things.
Go up an obelisk? Why not?
Actually, an interesting fact I forgot to mention is that when the Confederates reinvaded Kentucky in the Heartland Campaign, Confederate General Bragg actually inaugurated the shadow governor of Kentucky, who at that time was Richard Hawes. But during the inauguration celebrations, the Confederate soldiers were so absent-minded that they were ambushed by Don Carlos Buell's men out of Louisville, Union troops. So for a while, there were actually 2 governors of Kentucky, interestingly enough. Just look how many cranes there are. Wow. Gonna be making lots of batteries.
Sorry, Africa.
Or the ocean floor.
Don't worry, we'll just start mining asteroids.
It's good for the environment to go to.